Let's cut to the chase here. Evan Mobley is going to be a top 5 pick in the 2021 NBA draft. But how high can he really go? This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. From the moment that he became the highest ranked player to commit to the Trojans, Evan Mobley transformed USC basketball. Mobley enjoyed an extremely productive freshman season in Southern California. He deservedly won accolade after accolade, becoming the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, Player of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year, one after the other. There is no doubt that Mobley is tailor-made for the NBA. At 7 feet 215 pounds with a 7'4" wingspan, he is everything you want in a modern center. Combine his physical tools with his defensive dominance and his flashes of offense, Mobley is rightly projected as a surefire top 2 pick in the 2021 NBA draft. Let's start in the paint, which is where Evan Mobley gets the most joy right now. Mobley dominates this area of the floor on both sides of the basketball, and simply put, he is most comfortable here. His go-to shot at this moment is this little jump hook, which he utilizes to great effect. At 7 feet tall, Mobley can get into this shot basically whenever he wants. When he stretches out his arm, it is almost impossible to block his hook at its apex. But it is also important to note that it's not like Mobley just raises his arm over everyone and shoots. There is a real craft to his hook shot. He can rise into it off a couple of dribbles, spin into it, or attack a closeout from the perimeter before following into the jump hook. Mobley has all sorts of little moves, and what he also has is really soft touch. Mobley could be much taller than everyone else and just toss bricks up towards the basket, but instead he caresses the basketball into the net. Mobley is capable of doing this with either hand, which is not something that is very common for a 19-year-old prospect. Watch here against Arizona as Mobley drives right, makes the hard spin, and finishes left. He has also flashed some signs of having a little turnaround jumper in his arsenal. The same thing for his hook shot applies here. Mobley has a high release point paired with soft touch that is really tough to stop. He still has work to do on consistently making this shot, but just the flashes are already very appealing, especially for a 7-footer. So while Mobley can create his own offense down low, be it a hook shot or a turnaround, we must also recognize that he can do all the basics you require from a center. That means that if you ask Mobley to get his own shot off, he can do that, but he can also thrive within a team-dependent context. Mobley is able to do just about everything that you will ever require from a big. In my eyes, that versatility is what makes him such a can't-miss prospect. Because if you just need Mobley to catch and finish, then he has no problem doing that. Get him moving towards the basket or put him in the dunker spot and he will cause the opposing team problems. Not only is Mobley huge, but he has great hands, can play above the rim, and finishes just about everything at the basket. Alright, so now that we know that Mobley can manufacture his own offense and also catch and finish in the paint, what else can he do? Well, a lot of NBA teams nowadays just ask their centers to run the floor hard and make the most of their chances created through that. By no means am I advocating for Mobley to be utilized as a mere rim runner. His skill set is much broader than that, but there are certainly scenarios out there where his team needs that from him. Predictably, the good news is that he can rim run as well. Mobley is light on his feet and can get out easily in transition. Then he can either catch and finish lobs or act as a trailer. Mobley made over 76% of his shots at the rim this year, and it was not any small sample size either. From those shots, he made 103. Another thing that is the bread and butter for NBA centers nowadays is pick and roll situations. And yep, you guessed it, Mobley can also excel as a screen setter. The formula for success here is pretty obvious really. We've already seen that Mobley makes everything when he is close to the basket. So if you put him in a context where you're making those shots even easier for him, then he is bound to do well. In my opinion, Mobley is an underrated screen setter who, despite his narrow frame, does a good job of being hard to get around. And then, once he dives to the basket, he pretty much dunks every ball he gets his hands on. However, I actually expect Mobley's finishing in the pick and roll to come alive even more in the NBA. This USC team was very competitive, but I also thought they lacked natural point guards who could have made Mobley's life even easier. Nobody on the Trojans roster averaged more than 3 assists per game, and as I will get into later, Mobley himself probably should have led the team in assists. USC's game against Arizona is a good example of the bad pick and roll play that was often on display. Mobley was getting himself relatively open after setting the initial screen, but his teammates were just unable to find him. Here, the guard picks up his dribble too early, and Arizona takes the ball away. Yet another thing that is important for centers is rebounding. And while Mobley is not as imposing of a rebounder as Alperen Şengün or Isaiah Jackson for instance, he can definitely hold his own on the boards. He got about 9 rebounds per game, with 3 of those coming on the offensive glass. Mobley knows how to leverage his size to snatch up rebounds, which is easier said than done. I actually expect him to be even better at this a few years down the road when he puts on more weight and muscle in the NBA. Like any good center should, Mobley is able to create second chance opportunities for his team by being an active rebounder and crashing the glass with intent. Mobley can make game-winning plays in this department. Watch this huge tip dunk here as he follows the miss with the jam. Or down the stretch against Cal, Mobley ices the game by securing the offensive rebound and putting the ball back in with a right hook shot. Mobley can do all of the basics, be it scoring in the post, catching and finishing, playing above the rim, or having potential in the pick and roll. Doing all of those things at a high level already sets him apart, but there is even more to his game. For starters, Mobley has flashed some shooting ability. This is still a work in progress, but Mobley should eventually be a respectable 3-point shooter in the NBA. Right now, his shot is a little stiff and slow, but there is nothing overly wrong with it. Mobley made 30% of his threes this season, but with just 12 makes. Opponents will not rush out to close on him just yet, but I think there is definitely hope for that in the future. Mobley also made 70% of his free throws, which is improvable for sure, but he made 134 of them. His numbers, plus soft touch, are encouraging. Another part of Mobley's game that is enticing is his ability to put the ball on the floor. He has a surprisingly solid handle for a 7-footer, and can put the ball on the floor for short periods of time to good effect. Mobley does not have too many moves, but I think it is impressive that he can handle the ball with either hand and actually put those skills to use. When Mobley handles the ball, it is with the purpose of actually doing something, usually getting to the rim. Watch here against Washington, as Mobley goes one way, spins the other, and finishes. This against UConn is really impressive. Mobley brings the ball up the floor, changes from right to left, drives, and finishes off the glass through contact. Something important to note is that Mobley was doing all of the things I have mentioned so far while commanding an incredible amount of attention. Mobley basically got doubled every time he got the ball down low, especially towards the end of the season when opponents knew just how good he truly was. So perhaps the most impressive part of Mobley's freshman year at USC was how easily he dealt with all the attention he got. Mobley is a tremendous passer, and in fact, this might actually be the best part of his game. He is always composed and poised, never getting rushed even when the opponent converges on him. Mobley averaged about 2.5 assists per game. For comparison, he had 5 more total assists than total turnovers, but really, he should have had so many more assists. Mobley constantly made and executed the right read. He is able to quickly scan the floor and make the right decisions, which is rare for a 19-year-old, let alone a big. These were some of my favorite passes of his, starting against Arizona. The Wildcats toss a soft double at Mobley, so he spins to his right and finds a wide open 3. Against Washington State, Mobley gets the ball on the right post. Quickly, 4 or 5 WSU players go after him, but he keeps his calm and again hits the open shooter. Finally, versus Connecticut, Mobley quickly deals with the double team and perfectly tosses the pass across his body. Look at the defense and you can see how no one is expecting this dish. Overall, Mobley is just an extremely gifted passer who should be considered among the best in any position for this draft class. He is not going to make the same types of passes as a Cade Cunningham or a Trey Mann for instance, but for the types of plays that he is expected to make, I am confident in saying that Mobley ranks right up there. He is great at making quick decisions that more often than not are the right ones to find his teammates good looks at the basket. The Trojans did not always convert on Mobley's passes, but the fact that he is executing these reads is pretty incredible. As I said earlier, Mobley can quickly recognize the entire floor and base his final decision off of that. He is very good at not letting the ball stick in his hands and finding wide open threes. Another thing worth watching is Mobley's short roll passing. I mentioned before that USC's pick and roll play was not always great, but Mobley was good at these types of passes whenever he was able to dish them out. I think that this will definitely translate over to the NBA level. So what does Mobley still need to get better at? To some surprise, there are still a few things, honestly. It says a lot about him that Mobley already averaged over 16 points per game while being somewhat raw on this end of the floor. The most notable improvement area is his physicality. Mobley is skinny for his size at 215 pounds. Often, he struggles against stronger defenders, which he will regularly come up against in the NBA. Like we outlined earlier, Mobley is great at getting into his hook shot spinning or off the dribble, but when he has to bump with his defender, things get a lot tougher for him. Mobley is relatively easy to knock off balance because of his slender physique. If his man pushes him away from the basket or doesn't let him get close, then Mobley struggles. It's not necessarily that he does not want to be physical, he just can't right now. On that note, Mobley would also do well to add some more offensive moves to his arsenal. Right now, he does not have much besides his jump hook. When that shot is not falling, Mobley needs to have more counters. Adding a more consistent turnaround jumper would really benefit him. As you can see, the shot is still under construction, but it would help Mobley in a number of ways. For one, it gives him another tool, but I think he will really need this to some extent in the NBA. This will allow him to not get doubled as much, and he would also not need to be as physical. Really, shooting as a whole is something Mobley will have to get better at. The signs are there, sure, but he still needs to become more consistent. I am not too worried about this, since he is still really early in his development, but teams will want to see more in the future. He had less than 15 3-pointers all year, and his release will need to be quicker. Right off the bat, Mobley is not a threat from the outside, but he could become that in time. One last thing is that Mobley needs to be more assertive. Take this clip for instance. I would like to see him just shoot the 3 and see what happens. Too often, Mobley can just sort of let the game float past him. He will still make an impact, but it feels like he could dominate even more. Here against Utah, I want him to post up hard and demand the ball. He actually finished this game playing 31 minutes and taking 0 shots. Mobley took less than 10 shots in 1/3 of his games at USC. That, in my opinion, is being unselfish to a fault. Let's get into Mobley's defense, which for me is actually better than his offense. Mobley absolutely controlled the paint for the USC Trojans. An important distinction to make right off the bat is that USC typically used Mobley in drop coverage. We've gone over this in other videos, but essentially, Mobley is more conservative when the opponent sets a screen. He will hang back and play the angle between the ball handler and the roller, letting the initial USC defender come back into the play to contest. Mobley was really good in this defensive scheme. It played to his strengths as a rim protector and he rarely made mistakes. Here against Arizona, watch how Mobley positions himself to avoid the lob, backpedals, and intercepts the pass. Or here against Oregon, there's a slight wrinkle. The screener actually pops out instead, but Mobley is nimble enough to get out to the perimeter and contest. In general, Mobley is just a really effective rim protector. Not only is he almost always in the right place, but he is very hard to shoot over because of his height and length. Watch these closeouts here. First, Mobley easily keeps up with Quad A Green, stays with him on the drive, and forces the turnover. Then, Mobley sees that Oregon State is about to get a wide open 3. He rushes out to the 3-point line and denies what seems like a surefire 3-pointer. Mobley is a genuine defensive difference maker. He patrols the paint and has excellent fundamentals. He makes himself big, stays vertical, and he raises everything at the rim. Really, his impact should be measured beyond block numbers, but of course, Mobley also gets plenty of rejections. Like I implied, his timing is excellent. Mobley can get off the floor really quickly and use all of his standing reach to come up with some important blocks. It is true that USC basically kept him in the paint, and that maybe he won't be able to do that as much in the NBA. But I don't expect Mobley to have any problems making rotations at the next level besides the initial adjustment period. Patience will be needed with Mobley just because playing the center position in the NBA requires a big step up. DeAndre Ayton, a big who came out of college with more or less the same potential as Mobley, did not truly get comfortable until this year. Either way, I think that Mobley will eventually become a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and one of the best rim protectors in the entire league. Out on the perimeter, Mobley is not as dominant as in the paint, but I think that he can hold his own and occasionally be able to switch and check smaller guards or wings. Everything goes back to his impressive mobility at 7 feet. Mobley is obviously a center, but he can move like a wing. His long limbs give him margin for error, but his foot speed is surprisingly quick, and his understanding of defense is just too good. Check this out against Utah off the inbound. Mobley has to switch, but he stays all the way with the drive, never bites on the fakes, and comes up with the block. Or against UW, Mobley switches, which does not happen often. Against Quaddy Green, he completely smothers the former 5-star recruit, blocks the 3-pointer, and then gets fouled down the other end of the floor. Like on offense, Mobley's biggest area of improvement on defense is his physicality. Mobley is a tremendous shot blocker and rim protector, but there are times where that is cancelled out because his opponent is just tougher than him right now. If you're able to take the ball into Mobley's chest and displace him, you have a good chance of scoring over his length. USC's game against Washington State was a good example of this. Mobley is a much better player than Deshaun Jackson, but WSU's center was able to get the upper hand on Mobley a few times just by being physical with him. It's likely that Mobley will struggle with this at first in the NBA. This lack of physicality is also manifested on the few times that Mobley has been boxed out and not been allowed to protect the rim. These 2 times stand out to me, when Mobley was essentially sealed off by an attacker so that he could not make an impact. This is another smart way to cancel out his rim protection. Lastly, I am still interested in seeing how Mobley does on switches in the NBA. We got a relatively small sample size in college where he did well, but it wasn't always against the best players or athletes. In the long term, I think Mobley will be alright, but I'm very curious to see how he does against the best guards in the world. Alright, this video is getting pretty long, so allow me to make my case for Evan Mobley in just a couple of sentences. Basically, whatever you want from a center, Evan Mobley can do it. On attack, he can create his own shot in the post. He can catch and finish. He can play in the pick and roll. He can rim run. He's shown flashes of being able to shoot out to the 3-point line. He might be able to handle the ball a little bit. And on defense, well, he's just absolutely dominant. Mobley is absolutely fantastic in drop coverage, he can rebound, he can block shots at will, and I think that he will be able to switch, even though we do need a bigger sample size. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Evan Mobley, and if you enjoyed the channel, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.